Clay is interesting. It is alluring, it's sexy, it's frustrating, it's incredibly hard, it goes through all these changes like people do, you know, like, man, who doesn't like sitting down and watching somebody throw a pot?
It's very satisfying. It's a meditation. What goes into the work and the feelings of the person making it, somehow that gets absorbed and then transferred.
I think when I first fell in love with it, it was this way to sort of have control over so many aspects of the process, and to be able to make a cup was a really special thing. At its most rudimentary form, ceramics is sort of a interpersonal device in the sense of, like, I've been doing it so long that I can use it to communicate any part of my life. It's as much a part of me as it is anything. And so on its most, rudimentary physical level, clay is just earth. And that's pretty special too, right? I really like the idea that I'm not working with plastic, I'm not working with anything that has to be sort of developed in a lab. So I started making pots when I was about 14 years old. And at the time I thought I was gonna be an auto mechanic. I was a freshman in high school and needed to do art electives. One of my older brothers is an incredible illustrator and could draw or paint anything, by the time he was in high school. And I didn't want to be in anything that he was gonna do, because whatever the art version of hazing is, I'm sure I would have experienced with him. So I took a pottery class with all my long-haired friends, and it just clicked, and it clicked in a way that felt to me way more natural than sort of working on cars. That always felt like this giant object that had so many moving parts that took so many hands to build, and all of a sudden I had control of every step of this process. And so it just held my attention like super well. The high school that I ended up going to was 4 kick wheels and 1 electric kiln, and a teacher who was incredible. And she said, you can do this thing that you love and go anywhere in the world, and it's kind of like a universal language. You can take this pottery thing and sort of explode it and pick any piece from it and build a career on that alone. We try to have a sort of as low of a footprint as we can on the world, on the earth. And I think, again, that's sort of built into the nature of making pottery, because you're pulling things out of the earth and it's very labor intensive in a field where originally everything was done by hand. In this act of repetition, there's going to be byproduct, and everything is valuable. I was taught growing up that everything sort of has a life and a soul to it, and that's a very traditional way of thinking in a lot of cultures, and growing up for me, that was important, and not to waste things, especially the earth. Take care of where you came from and what takes care of you.
He's focusing primarily on doing volumetric transfer of these images, and he's mastered it. He's done an amazing job. I tried it. It's not easy. It's really difficult, but they're beautiful, and his forms are beautiful. They're so well suited to what he's doing with decoration. I think it's really successful. And whenever I see his work, I want to buy some.
I don't think I would be me without throwing pots, and I'm pretty good at it, I think. So how could I integrate the image transfer that was, how do I force this into the throwing process? Oh, right, you know, like I want to tell stories with pattern. I want to put pattern on pots. This is a way to do that. So, you know, you're like cutting out patterns and sticking them on pots and trying to make it look believable. But then, you know, thinking of all the things I've seen in my life, all of a sudden it just clicked, like, why don't I just throw a cylinder? There's a million versions of people putting pattern on cylinders in their hands and stretching them out. Like, I think I was just stupid enough to have to develop a new process that was really hard. I didn't want to just take the things that I had been shown. In order for me to do it, I knew it was going to be a major uphill battle. The most important part when you're doing the volumetric image transfer process isn't necessarily the throwing, it's not necessarily the techniques, it's the material. And so it took me a long, long time to develop a material relationship between the ink that we make, the slip that we transfer on the pot, the clay itself, is it plastic enough? Is it going to stretch and crack? Is it going to, and then also the timing. The timing is really, really hard when you've never done it before.
Formulas are shared easily. You'd never find that in painting. And what happens is a lot of craft people do workshops and demonstrations all over. Everyone who's doing it online, there's so many people. How did you learn that? Oh, I learned it on YouTube. Ow! You know, and so that kind of diffuses the creative aspect because it's all up for grabs.
Sort of in true ceramicist fashion, once I got it down, the next step was to try to teach it. Because most clay people don't hold on to secrets. They just want everybody to have that.
If your motive is to just sell, make things to sell, I think that is not the right motive, you know, and it probably comes across in the work. You know, you could never live in California and make what I make and sell what I sell and succeed.
The hardest part, honestly, is the act of running the business with the same amount of integrity that I made the pot. And I think there are people around me, the people who care about me the most, that go, well, you're not making pots the way you used to. You're not making as much work. You're managing a business. And I understand that. And sometimes I wish I had the time to just sit down at the wheel. But I know it will always be there. I only have a little bit of history of being a business owner. And I can pick it apart and point out all the problems. And I don't shy away from that. I go like, well, you need to do that better. And it's not, I think part of it too is it's not natural for me. The dialogue I have with people is natural. When I sell tile, I'm not trying to sell tile, I'm trying to have a conversation, so that's natural and it works really well for me. But the minute I recognize the stigma that comes with being a business owner or being a salesperson, that's when I'm outside my body looking in and going like, do you really want to own a business? Do you really want to be a salesperson? Do you really want to, you know, just talk about the work and not make the work? And that's hard. That's when I can look in on myself and start to question, am I doing it right? It's hard to remember sometimes when you think about all the pressure of making money and all the pressure of paying a lease and all the pressure of, like, you know, putting food on the table.
It's hard to be a potter and create and make the work, but now there's so many demands on it. You have to photograph it, you have to have a website, you've got to keep it all functional, you've got to upload your images, change things. Most people, a lot of people, older people like me, don't want to do that. I've gotten so I almost detest using my phone. To make money as a potter, There are a lot of people, not a lot, there are a handful of people that have done it. Forrest is one of them. He's got a community studio, and he's not just making his own pots and trying to sell them, make a living by going to art fairs. He was able to diversify. He's created a business, a huge one, where he has a studio and he has students and he has workshops and he has a tile business on top of that. He's really diversified and been very good at it, very successful.
What inspires me currently, I think, is collaboration with a designer, collaborating with my wife, Beth, who is an incredible artist, and we met making art, and it's no wonder that we're now making art together, and we collaborate and we agree and we disagree on where things need to go, and we end up with a great product, and I feel like we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for both of us. So that level of collaborating, we collaborate in the product, but we also collaborate on the business, and I think not all couples can work together, you know, and we're really fortunate that we can. Working with clay, working with art, you know, it's a great way to convey a narrative. The best work that I see people making is all about history. Anytime that someone pulled from history, their work was just better, in my mind. I knew I wanted to make work that had content. I knew I wanted to integrate history. I get to college, and the US starts bombing Iraq again.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks...
And I just remember sitting there and being like, I need to talk about this. I need to make work about this. I didn't know that that's one of the few seats of civilization. Modern math was invented in that part of the world. The best food I've ever had is from that part of the world. What I didn't know at the time was that some of the most amazing people I'll ever meet in my life are from that part of the world. I wanted to make work about that, and I wanted to take these beautiful patterns that everybody can relate to. If you see a Iznik pattern, you've probably seen it somewhere else, and you either don't know or you recognize it and go, well, what was that? Where is that from? And so by taking that beauty and taking that sort of trigger and elevate it on a pot, you know, that's made by hand, I want this to inform me, and I want it to inform you. So sure, it's a pretty pattern, but where's it from? Who invented this style of making? This pattern in particular is a really great one because it shows up in Japan, it shows up in Southeast Asia, in China, it shows up in India. So taking this pattern and putting it on the pot is one thing, but then also making the pot so it feels like it's been through something. Because I think, to me, the most amazing people are the people who have seen the most, maybe. I think that's important to talk about.
The method and the process is kind of like the message. If you look at his work, it tells a story behind it, right? There's a history and there's patterns to his work, and so you have to look beyond the actual thing itself and look to how it's going to be used, right? When it comes to utilitarian work, or how it's going to be perceived when it comes to tile. And what is the pattern and what is the message behind that? Because it's not always face value. There's the process that goes behind that, and I think that also does apply for all ceramics, not only his, but specifically because of the message that it has with current issues and people around the world. But I think that's what I learned. There's something behind everything.
I collaborated with Arash Shirinbab, who is a calligrapher from Iran. I had these ideas of what I wanted to make. I had been collecting tweets from refugees from Syria and Libya and Iraq and all these wars and sort of places that things had been happening where people had been forced to leave their country. And I had this idea of what I was going to do with it, but it takes me forever to formulate something into an actual process or object. And then this guy Arash shows up from Iran. I had always grown up, hearing that, that's a place where people are different and they're bad and what they believe is wrong and whatever. And that to me is compelling because I don't always believe what people tell me because I want to draw my own conclusions. And of course, what do you learn when you do that? You learn that there's amazing people everywhere doing amazing things. And so Arash and I did this work where we took that calligraphy that he was doing so beautifully, and we overlaid it on top of these tweets that I had collected over the years from refugees, and then made pots and made tile and made things that had all of that sort of put into it. And then we would have these dinners where we would eat off the plates that had all of that on it. So that's inspiring to me. It's inspiring that wasn't just my idea. I started with 6 or 7 patterns, and each of them had meaning, so here's a really interesting story that relates to this that maybe isn't about how many we have. I think we probably do 20 patterns. So I put together this body of work. I have this exhibition. That night I get a phone call, and he says, "Love to talk to you about your patterns." He tells me that this one pattern, well, this is a Coptic cross. The Coptics are sort of the longest lasting sect of Christianity in the world. I'm from Iraq, and my brother is Coptic and lives in Egypt, on the border with Rafah. 10 years later, I start a tile company, and the people who I'm working with say, you need to name all these patterns. So I Google Coptic cross Egypt. And 3 days prior to me Googling that, there had been a massacre of Coptic people in Rafah. And I wanted to humanize the pattern. And so we called it Rafah. And it is so important to me that people see that I was talking about that 13 years ago. I'm not just trying to capitalize on this shit that's going on, but it would be such a horrible disservice for me not to tell that story. What just happened here? If I go to squeeze, you'll notice that it got a little taller. What you can't see, because it's hard to tell what's happening on the inside, is it also got really much thinner. So if I take a piece of clay like this.
I think there's a saying in the craft world where it's like you learn it, you do it, and then you teach it, because there's a process. That is the process behind the final object. And I think that's really important, that to come to that conclusion of then teaching it and then passing it on.
I have an opportunity to make tile every day, to throw pots every day, to teach classes every day, and I can't do it all, and that's a really good feeling. So then I get to pull in other people. Beth and I get to work with other people in our community to do these things, and we recognize their qualities and their craftsmanship and their ability to teach. And I just love sort of slipping into teaching beginners, because that's truly where I learn the most. The nuance in teaching a beginner, at least on the physical level of like sitting down and throwing a pot, is infinite. You could learn as a teacher forever teaching beginners. The way that you talk about something, the way that you, like one of the things that didn't come to me for the longest time, and it seemed so simple, was teaching somebody how much pressure to exert on a pot to make sure it's centered, or to get it to be centered. Teaching an advanced class, or teaching like an independent study or something like that, that's when it becomes an intellectual conversation, and that's when you can get to content, and that's when you can dissect form in a way that you can't with a beginner. That's when you can sort of use representational analogies, and you're not just talking about reflexive tendencies, you're talking about somebody's past or somebody's response to something. If they just render this and you ask them why and they don't know, then you can sort of dissect that. And that I've seen some stuff teaching that just blew my mind, where I've asked a student, why, the best question in the world is why, and sometimes the best answer is I don't know. But I asked a student, why it was they did the thing that they did, and I, to this day, can't remember what it was. But they started to answer, and then they paused and got really emotional. And I think in that moment they realized, holy shit, I just said something that I didn't even know I had to say. And it was in there somewhere, and now it's in this figure or in this pot or whatever it was. And it really impacted them.
I love the way in which Forrest tells his stories. Not only is he a teacher, he's a natural-born storyteller. And I think that you can see that through his work. And I think through his stories, he touches a lot of people. And that's probably my favorite thing about him.
Alex, who is our current apprentice, and he is by far our youngest apprentice we've ever had. He's straight out of high school, and he walks around with more wonder than anybody I know. He is just one of those people who soaks things up. He talks fast, not because he's a fast talker, because he's excited, you know, and he probably learns through that lens. And so what a great gift for me. That's someone who's excited to hear what I have to say. And one of the greatest lessons for me to learn as a mentor to somebody is I have to work for them too, right? If I'm not on my game when Alex is here, I know it. And so my greatest hope is that he walks out of this studio with a greater thirst for knowledge. He's gonna learn our techniques. He's gonna learn how to throw better. But if he leaves here going, I want more, then it's like, my job is done. I'm super happy.
Not anyone can just say, I want to pursue ceramics. It's kind of a hard thing to say, and it's a hard thing to do because there's a lot of nuance to it. But to be across from someone like Forrest, who's accomplished like he is, it provided me with a lot more security and helped me build a little bit more confidence. Coming out of the apprenticeship, especially under his guidance, I felt like almost my vision and my idea for my future is so much clearer. Because like anyone can say, I want to become a potter, or I can try to become a potter, but if I didn't do this apprenticeship, I think I would be so blurred. Maybe I would be taking classes still, but it's the opportunity and it's the wisdom and it's the advice that he gave me that makes my path so much clearer. And I think that's really special.
We use this clay, which is an iron-rich clay that I use specifically for two reasons. One is, looks like it's been through more, looks like it can handle more, it's not pristine, it's not perfect. There is that, and that's great, but also this clay responds to the reduction cooling process. White clay doesn't because it doesn't have iron in it. If you cool iron in an oxygen poor environment, it changes from red to black. From, imagine like the rust on your car versus a cast iron pan. And we're doing the same thing here in the cooling process. We're converting that iron to black iron, and it makes the pots look way better. It makes them look like what my hope is they've been through something. In the clay world, there's a lot of sharing and there's a lot of stealing. Most glaze recipes that you see in studios like ours come from someone else. They often have a name attached to them. I use a glaze on the inside of this called Longchuan Celadon, which is Chinese. Probably has years and years of history, and it's been formulated and reformulated, and I just sort of caught one, and it's the perfect thing. Historically, it's the perfect thing. Visually, it works really well in these pots. I think where I draw a line between handmade and machine-made, I guess, is or not machine-made, but mass-produced, is the intent. We say we make handmade tile, and we have been called out for not making handmade tile, or handmade pots more specifically, because we press some of the things we make on a hydraulic press, which is a machine. It comes off the hydraulic press as a fully formed plate. Not a great fully formed plate. Like, I designed it to not be finished. I designed it so that we could get this object off of it and keep working. And therefore, the press as a tool is just a tool. We have like 3 people who work for us making stuff. Production-wise, it's me and Pedro and Wyatt. They ask me questions every day about my process. It's the process that's defining the idea behind the work. And our hands are very involved in that, right? Like, here I am, scrape, scrape, scrape. When we put a pattern down on a tile, we've printed it by hand on a silk, we're using a silk screen. That handmade print comes over, that could be a work of art in itself. And so we then add that handmade print that we designed from a pattern that we found that then goes on a pot that comes out, on a tile that comes out of a machine. We transfer the image, we go back and sand it and do all that. It's gone through more time in the hand than it has in the machine by magnitudes of 10. I really love the thought that, as a tile maker, we're making tile by hand, we're firing it. Every tile, if you put 100 tile together and you just looked at them, you go, oh wow, that's a cohesive pattern of cohesive objects. But I love the idea of it being handmade and a kid, in their family's home where they have one of our backsplashes or they have tile of ours on the floor, and they get drawn to that one tile, and every day they go up and they go, that's the one that really, like, look how different this one is. And that was me as a kid. My parents had this hand-carved table in our house, and I'd sit under it and I'd trace these little raised patterns on it, and I always knew which one was which, and it felt like home. Versus if I was to buy tile from a big box tile store, it's all going to be the same. It's meant to be exactly the same, and it's kind of a shame, But the world of craft is a really special world, and I think most people, when they sort of dive in a little deeper, realize that's kind of a world they want to be part of. It's pretty neat. There's a lot of sharing. There's a lot of good food. There's a lot of great stories and a lot of great people in the world of craft doing interesting things. And there's a lot of problem solving. We could not do this without other people. I could not do this without other people. I have a lot of friends who are the solitary potter in the country, and they do everything. And I have so much respect for that. I thought I was the village potter until somebody told me I wasn't. And then it was like, oh my God, I'm not who I think I am. And then I got to wash my hands of it and be like, no, embrace this. Right? Embrace the fact that you're not the solitary village potter who's got NPR playing all day and is baking bread and making tea for anybody who walks in the door. I can't be that person. I think the biggest gift that I have to give is my excitement about clay.
And I think that's the point. You see something so beautiful, and that's what drives you first, right? It's that hook line, that hook sentence, and then he's able to feed these ideals and really teach you about. Because that's what he is at the heart. He's a teacher.
When I think about what legacy would mean to me, I like that thought of it can be embraced or vilified, because I think a lot of people who are conscious of their own ego sort of go, oh, I don't want to be thought of as somebody who has a legacy. I don't want to be thought of as somebody who's trying to build a legacy. There's a fine line between that and narcissism. And being a potter, not to get grandiose, you can't. There's only so much you can do with a pot. But if you put something in someone's hand that means something, versus, and they're going to drink their tea or their coffee out of it, versus something that they bought at Target, that's going to influence their day in a very minute but special way. I don't know anybody who doesn't want something that's made by hand. Sure, there's people who are like, oh yeah, those IKEA cabinets are better than the shitty cabinets that my uncle made. But I think most people who pay attention to that go, my uncle made that. I want to put good things in the world that are going to be used for a long time and seen for a long time and hopefully enjoyed for a long time. I mean, I get a little bit emotional because I've had a great career. I've been very fortunate to take all of the things that I learned that were special to me and give them back.